And it's amazing how this technology from 1982 is coming back. And I think Xiaomi and eCash was tried back in the day by usually like Citibank and Deutsche Bank and like some big players. And then they probably thought, oh, this is all too private here. Maybe we drop it. Excuse me? And the credit card came. Okay, exactly. Perfect. Eric, you want to come up? And have you also played with the cashew thing? How are you doing?
Good, good. It's a pleasure to be here. It's great to be back in El Salvador. I already gave a talk about Fediment last year, and I'm happy that so many people are here again and want to hear about. Sorry?
Perfect. How many times have you been in El Salvador? Like, it's your third time?
It's my third time.
Okay, and what's your perception? How do you feel? Like, it's different than the first time? You love it?
Yeah, I don't know how much it changed, but it definitely changed me. Like, I just love staying in Bitcoin Beach and working from there. I always expected I wanted to be in big cities, but no, I just enjoyed so much there.
Yeah, I was just flying in from LA, and we had this weird Uber driver watching sort of Asian karaoke while hip hop was playing in the background, and then you land in El Salvador and the birds are singing and you drink a first coffee and you're like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, you wake up in the morning, go to the beach, go for a walk. Just, yeah, it's beautiful. Everyone who hasn't been in Bitcoin Beach, go there, stay there for a while. It will change your life.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody made the way came all the way here,
yeah, exactly,
and doing this, yeah. So at Fediment, you're working with Justin Moon and Obi.
Yeah, I'm still actually sponsored by Blockstream, but I also founded a startup, Fedi, with Justin Moon and Obi, which is now building on top of Fediment, the protocol.
Okay.
And yeah, so today I will be talking about Fediment, but Obi will have some panels. I think. And if you want to learn more about that, then definitely go there.
All right, so Obi is giving panels, and he's also around, I saw.
Yeah, he is around, and Justin Moon too.
Okay, so the whole team is down here. Yeah. So we have a little Fediment base here. Perfect. I think we're going to kick it off, and the stage is yours. You're talking about federations for sovereign communities. With Fediment is also Xiaomi and eCash, no?
Yeah, it is. So I actually requested from Noor that our presentations be put right after each other, because that way I don't have to explain all the eCash stuff again. And Kalle did a great job here. And if you haven't been to the previous presentation, then definitely go back and watch it on YouTube afterwards once it's released. He did a great job explaining eCash. And I will be today more talking about how federations as a general concept, not only federated eCash, can help communities become sovereign or survive in a sovereign environment. But first of all, what do I mean when I'm talking about sovereign? Like when we look at the definition, sovereignty means that other people or third parties cannot exert control over you. And there's this nice book that many of you probably read, The Sovereign Individual, which describes how a lot of us will one day become sovereign individuals that are not reliant on anyone else, who can just travel the world and enjoy life without ever being told what to do. But kind of implicitly, I feel this assumes that we can supply ourselves with all the needs of life. Like, if you want to be truly sovereign, you need to be able to feed yourself, you need to be able to supply yourself with medical care, you need to be able to defend yourself, and you need to be able to hold your money in a self-sovereign way. And like the money part we have figured out with Bitcoin, don't get me wrong, like we can totally do that. We are pretty sovereign that way. But all the other things, I think most of us do and will probably continue to rely on other people. And we cannot force other people to like give us food if we're working in this like libertarian mindset or moral framework. So are we actually sovereign? I don't think so. And most of us probably never will be. Like maybe if you're a weird mountain man sitting on top of a hill farming your own grass-fed beef, then maybe. But I don't think that's a life that many of us want. So what's an alternative? My alternative is the sovereign community. Like if we, as like libertarians or like Bitcoin anarchists kind of, don't want to live in a society dominated by huge, big states, then the next best thing, to me at least, seems to have a community that can supply us with all our needs, but has its own rules, its own self-governing system, but it's really small. So you can go from one community to a different one if you want to switch. Like, I don't know what you would call it. Like, there's probably a term for it in philosophy and like political discussion. But for me, it's just a feeling. Like, I want to have my tribe. I want to live together with other Bitcoiners. That's like Moritz asked me how often I've been in El Salvador, and like 3 times, of which 2 were just to be in Bitcoin Beach because they're other Bitcoiners. They are my tribe. I want to live with them. I want to stay with them. Want to interact with them. And so the Sirion community is a real dream of mine. And that's what I want to go into today. So what the community gives you is specialization. That's the whole point. Like, humanity has become efficient because we specialize. Like, I don't have to be a butcher if I want to eat good meat. I don't have to be like great at handling Bitcoin. Or I shouldn't have to be great at handling Bitcoin just to use it as a system. I shouldn't need to be a doctor to stay healthy. So, and like one of these specializations I want to get into, which is what Fedimint is mostly about so far, and that is running Bitcoin infrastructure. Because how many of you are running Lightning nodes actually? That's quite a few. Wow, that's more than expected, which is great. Bravo, great audience. But who of you thinks it's difficult? Versus who of you thinks it's easy? I think there are quite a few people that quite more people that think it's difficult than it's easy, and that's also what I feel like. Running a Lightning node, keeping it well balanced, keeping it connected, up and running, all these things. It takes a few hours a week for me, and also custodying Bitcoin properly, like keeping the server running securely, it's not that easy. And in the end, like, people have other worries. Like, for example, when I go to a doctor, I want them to be a good doctor and not spend half their time worrying about how they receive payment in Bitcoin from me. Like, that would be a worse doctor if they did. So what it leads to is we need to specialize. And one proposal is like using community members or family and friends as Uncle Jim banks. Like, it's this term that emerged. Like, you just have this Uncle Jim who is really into Bitcoin, who runs his own Lightning node, and he allows you to use his Lightning node to make payments. He gives you an account in there. For example, that's LNbits, which is quite popular. There is a plugin for BTC Pay Server, which makes it into such an Uncle Jim bank. I think you can run your own Blue Wallet backend that way, and also a simple Bitcoin wallet, which is now, I forgot the name. It's split into multiple other implementations. They all have ways where you can use friend and family as your bank, essentially. But that still has a big problem, which is privacy. Like, ideally, I also want the people using it to be private. So we don't want to use the simple solution, which would be like LNbits, but something more cool, and that's eCash-based Uncle Jim banking. And that's exactly what Khaled just explained with Cashew. And I won't be going into too much detail because he did a great job explaining it. But just for people that weren't here on a high level, what we do is we have our Uncle Jim there, which is this nice, cute cashew nut. And we have me as a user here. And I can create a check that says, like, Uncle Jim now owes me 1 Bitcoin. And if I get a signature on this check, then Uncle Jim has to honor this commitment. And the special thing here is I put it into an envelope. It's a magical envelope that anything I write on the outside of the envelope will be also on the paper on the inside. So I put this check in there, give 1 Bitcoin and the closed envelope to Uncle Jim. Uncle Jim will sign it. Hey, yeah, I'm Uncle Jim. I got the 1 Bitcoin. Here you go. Here you have your check back. I take it out of the envelope, and then I have a bearer instrument, like a piece of paper that says that Uncle Jim now owes me this 1 Bitcoin, and Uncle Jim is safekeeping it for me. At a later point, I can go back to Uncle Jim, give him the check, and he will give me back the 1 Bitcoin, or he will pay it to someone if I specify an address. Like, imagine I'm at Bitcoin Beach right now. want to pay for my rent in a hotel. The Bitcoin price is down a lot, so I have to pay a whole Bitcoin, and I just give Uncle Jim back the check, and now he pays the hotel for me, and I don't have to worry. But there is a big problem. You see, Uncle Jim might get really drunk one night and decide to spend all the Bitcoin he has from friends and family in custody to buy a big tungsten cube. And then he gets really embarrassed about it and he flees to the Bahamas. So we definitely want to avoid that. It's not good if that happens. But how do you avoid it these days? Like, this doesn't happen all the time in the legacy banking system. And I mean, at least we don't hear about it all the time because banks get bailed out. But like how it works in the legacy system is you have huge centralized faceless institutions where you don't really know why you would actually trust them. You just trust them kind of because a lot of people trust them, I guess. And in the past, there happened a lot of scams and scandals, and that's why we made up a lot of rules that kind of keep them in check and that kind of prevent like these random strangers from defrauding us. But it only works because the entities where these banks operate in, or these big institutions, like as big states with monopoly on violence, like if a banker tried to actually get away with stealing all the money from his clients, then he would get hunted down by armed men and put in prison. Like, you need the violence here. But that's not a great cypherpunk solution, in my opinion. Like, in my opinion, we want a solution that does not rely on this monopoly of violence, that does not rely on arbitrary rules that are like set for a huge area. Like, nation states have become huge, like in the 19th, 20th century, and yeah, we want a different solution for this problem. And in my opinion, a good alternative would be having local institutions with local rules that you have actually a say in creating. You split the trust over multiple people that you kind of already trust because they're your family, they're your friends, they're like maybe the people at your church, the people with whom you play cricket every evening. And you use, instead of violence, you use the social connections, the social bonds, and kind of a social pressure to keep everyone honest. And you can do it because it's on a much smaller scale. Like a banker in New York will not feel any social pressure when they defraud you. Like, they don't know you, they don't care. But if it's like your neighbor, you have a base assumption of trust there already. And like, that's essentially the idea behind federations. Like, when we think back to the eCash scheme that Kalle explained and that I gave a short overview of, like, what if we actually split the trust or like split the responsibility over multiple people? Like, what if we had, instead of one Uncle Jim, we had 4 Uncle Jims, and they all have joint custody over our Bitcoin? Like, we now have a 3 or 4 multi-sig wallet where like each of the Uncle Jims owns 1 key and operates this so-called federation, which is an eCash mint, and like which also allows people to deposit Bitcoin. They get their eCash tokens in return. They can use them. They can exchange them, trade them. But it's always backed by 100% Bitcoin. And as long as like not more than one of them goes offline, then everything is okay. Everything keeps running. And as long as less than 3 of them conspire against the users, they cannot even steal the money. So that's an upgrade, I think, from the single issue eCash bank we described in the beginning. So the core concept here, what I'm getting at, is we want to split responsibility over multiple semi-trusted parties. And that's exactly what we're doing with Fedimint. Like, I've done a deep dive last year on Fedimint, and it got kind of technical. Like, I lost a lot of people. That's why I'm not doing this year. It's essentially a project that implements this federated eCash scheme where you can deposit money to a group of friends or to your local community, and they manage it for you. And yeah, then you can use it on Lightning, you can use it on mainnet. And we have gained a lot of traction. Like, I was really positively surprised by the community reaction when I proposed it. We now got an implementation here, a Rust code base and some Nix infrastructure with 33 contributors. We are being funded by multiple companies. Like we have multiple open source developers on grants now. Like Blockstream is funding me. I'm working in the Blockstream research team, and I'm enormously grateful because they have been a great supporter from the beginning. I also had like a lot of support on the crypto side. So shout out to Tim Ruffing, who helped me a lot with the crypto stuff. But there's also now Spiral, who's funding developers. There's the Human Rights Foundation, who gave us grant. There's 1031. There's Fedi, our newly founded startup, which is paying developers to work on Fedimint, the core protocol, because that's something that I like to keep different. I want Fedimint to be the protocol for federated applications on Bitcoin, while companies can build all kinds of stuff on top. Like it's a really flexible thing. And that's why I wanted to be as independent as possible. Yeah. We also had the mainnet demo at Hackers Congress Indianapolis. It was great. Like it was a kind of fake federation because I ran all the nodes. But we could showcase to people how it would work. We had a beautiful little wallet called Fluttermint that Justin Moon and Future Paul developed. We gave a few sets to people to experiment around, to buy some coffee. And I think everyone had a great time. Unfortunately, I had to shut it down because it was crashing my Lightning node all the time. We learned a lot from this deployment, I can tell you. And we are hoping that by end of the year, beginning of next year, we can begin like slowly getting communities onboarded as beta testers. And yeah, that will be a dream come true for me, having worked on this project for over 1.5 years now. So, but there's more than money, right? Like money is only 50% of each transaction. And so far we have been talking about how can we allow people to interact with Bitcoin without really needing to run all the infrastructure, which is kind of complicated. And that's Fedimint as an eCash scheme, or as an eCash system. But what if we could extend its functionality to other aspects of trade and commerce? And for that I want to go into the high-level architecture of Fedimint a bit, because it's actually quite versatile. Like it's not only an eCash system. Like what we're doing actually is we provide an execution environment that has a networking stack, so like your federation members can communicate with each other, which has a consensus algorithm, so they always agree on what is happening, which transactions are happening, or in which state they are in. And then we have a bunch of modules. Like we have an on-chain wallet for holding the funds in the multisig. We have an eCash module, which issues these bearer instruments, these bearer tokens. And then we have a Lightning module. I didn't go into this all that much, but with Fedimint, you always interact via Lightning invoices. You can pay Lightning invoices. You can receive via Lightning invoices. And yeah, that way we do not have a bootstrapping problem. Like everyone already supports Lightning, or at least here. So what if we could just add another module there? And that's like our amazing module. And now we just need to figure out what we actually want to implement, what we want to build. And I have some ideas for that. And I just want to give a few of my ideas, and then I would be interested in hearing from you. What would be your ideas for your communities? Like, there's 3 main areas, I think, or that I could come up with. There's markets, which have escrow and reputation systems. It sounds a little bit phony right now, but we'll get into what it actually means. There's crowdfunding, which we've seen in Bitcoin Beach a lot, and also community-enforced property rights that I find really interesting. So let's start with the markets. Oh, and yeah, most of that stuff could be built in a centralized way, but we don't want this. Like if the community is already running a federation, then why wouldn't we get all these things for free, essentially, if they're already running like some computer code? Okay, what do I mean with markets with escrow and reputation systems? Essentially, all these big startups, all these unicorns that we have seen can be described as a market with an escrow system and some reputation scheme. Like when you think about Uber, it's a marketplace for rides. When you think about Airbnb, it's a marketplace for stays. eBay is a marketplace for stuff. And Fiverr is a marketplace for online services, or yeah, people drawing little cute pictures for you. But all of them, if that was only the marketplace, there would be a lot of scamming going on, and there probably still is. But like one important part of these systems is they have an escrow system where, like, if the Uber driver doesn't pick me up, then I get my money back, and they don't get paid. Airbnb, if the flat I wanted to get into it doesn't exist, then I get my money back, they don't get paid, and so on. And there's also a reputation system, because if we only relied on the escrow, some people wouldn't really go through the hassle of getting their money back, and there would still be a positive expected value in scamming people, so we also need a reputation system to kind of keep that down. And if we could build like a general purpose marketplace and reputation system and escrow into a federation, I think at a local community level, we could replace all these services. And you could have your local El Sonta Airbnb company, or not company, but just Airbnb system kind of, that's managed maybe by the people at Hope House or the local drivers. I mean, I'm already like just chatting with them and telling them, hey, Carlos, can you pick me up at Hope House and get me to San Salvador, please? And that works because there's already trust. But what if you don't know anyone and kind of just want to get into the community, use the services? Then such a system would be of great value, in my opinion. And yeah, I think I explained like why it would be kind of useful. The second thing was crowdfunding. I think it's quite self-explanatory, actually. We've seen a lot of great ideas pop up in Bitcoin Beach. Like there's the Diente Sonte organization that's helping people with broken teeth to fix their teeth for free, and they collect donations from Bitcoiners. There's like the education program by Ibex Mercado, Mi Primer Bitcoin. They are also relying on donations, and like a lot of cool stuff that you want to do in local communities could be crowdfunded. Like for example, I also know someone wants to build a hospital in El Sonte. I couldn't find the screenshot, but they're also collecting donations. And if we get into bigger amounts, then maybe you don't want a single person to hold these donations. It's not even that you don't trust them, but if something horrible happened to them, like getting diagnosed with some horrible disease, then they might be tempted to abuse the money or to just take the money and like survive, because that's how humans work. Like there's always survival instinct in a sense. So just to protect yourself against like these black swan events, you might want your crowdfunding to happen in a threshold way, like that only if like 3 or 4 people sign off to the spending of the funds, then you can actually spend them. So I think that's also quite useful. The last thing you might be wondering what I actually meant, community enforced property rights, because it's not the case right now. Like we don't have sovereign communities anywhere, don't get me wrong. But if we ever end up in a state that there is no central control, like for example, if like the energy crisis in Europe continues to worsen and like we get into a state of anarchy of sorts, like the bad anarchy, not a good one, then you might want as a local community that controls some area to be able to say who owns which piece of land, and then want to have a record that is indisputable. For example, if you transfer the land and not that one party says, yeah, you actually sold it to me, but I don't have a record, and the other party is like, no, I didn't sell it to you, I was drunk that night, I don't remember. And so for communities, I think there are a lot of interesting applications of enforcing, like when the property rights are community enforced anyway. Like just because I claim I have a plot of land, that doesn't mean much. Like it always depends on what the people around me think is true. Kind of like few people are an island. Like of course I can be the weirdo who sits there with his shotgun on his front lawn, but I think in most circumstances, if your neighbors don't think that's your land, then it isn't your land. So having such a system in place where you can represent who owns what, and you have to trust, like you have to trust your community anyway with that. So why not put it in the system where you trust your community? And then you can also like automatically or atomically swap it for Bitcoin, for example, if you need liquidity and you want to sell your land, you don't need to go to a notary. And notaries are, as I learned, expensive and terribly annoying. So that would be a great way of getting rid of some of the old baggage that we have these days. Yeah, but the most important thing is, for me, what do you think your communities would need, or what are your thoughts on different applications that should be kind of federated, where we currently rely on trusted third parties or single trusted parties, and then I'd like to think about like how can we actually achieve that? because it's not always possible, but most of the time it is. And with that, I'm at the end of my presentation. If you want to learn more about Fedimint as a protocol, we have this great website, fedimint.org, by Pete Wynn. He redesigned it completely. Like, if you went there last year, go there again, please. Like, last year it was my horrible website. Now it's like beautiful. And there's also a workshop happening today in the digital room where we will show you how to set up your own federation. But please bring a laptop that at least is able to log in via SSH to some server. Like, there's not a lot of requirements. You should have internet connection and ideally some sort of SSH client. But otherwise, it will be harder to follow along. OK, then thank you very much for attending. And questions?
I have several questions. First one is that, does the eCash system need to resolve in an on-chain transaction? If not, then is that going to more like a credit system, because it's like the community can create new Bitcoin out of thin air as long as the community believe the group has enough Bitcoins. And one more question is that also about the eCash. The detail is that just now we saw is that when you sign it, you always sign with like a whole dollar. But in the example you show us, like when you pay to buy a coffee, you spend like just few cents, a fraction of the whole dollar. So how does things work right there?
I think the first part of the question was regarding how do we ensure that the federation is full reserve? Or, OK. That's actually one of the main problems with eCash schemes. And I'm not sure if Carla mentioned it before, but like, essentially you cannot really prove that the federation or the eCash mint is full reserves. You cannot prove it. You can only from time to time do an attestation. But that's kind of complicated. Like, you can only do it like every few months. And that's definitely a trade-off you have there. You have to trust the community. But that's why we want to keep the trust local. And that's also another thing is if the trust is local and even like one of the communities goes fractional reserve, it's not a contagion that spreads to other communities. So it's not a systemic risk, at least. But I definitely recognize the risk there, that single communities might be tempted to do that. We have currently software measures against it in place in the code, but it's open source code, so anyone could patch it out. And yeah, that's definitely a problem there. The second question was... oh, right, yeah, like the denomination thing, like if you want to pay a small amount, then what in reality happens, you give a bigger eCash node to like the mint and you split it into smaller ones and then you can pay with the smaller ones. Like if it's a small amount that you want to pay.
What is your reaction to the following set of statements? One of the reasons why centralized systems are more popular than federated systems is because it's easier to trust an individual than it is to trust a federation. Often you don't know who all the members are of the federation, and you don't know how trustworthy they are. What do you think about that?
The whole point of these community federations, like I was talking about sovereign communities today, is that you actually know the people running the federation. So it's like a clear step up from trusting any single of the operators, any single one, to trusting like a set of them to not conspire. I think there are way fewer trustworthy individuals that I would trust with holding my money as a single person. Like it's probably close to zero. While like people that I trust as a group, like at least for me, it doesn't make sense to not trust a group of somewhat trustworthy people more than like a single somewhat trustworthy individual. I don't know. Like it only currently works with like single individuals because we have this whole legal system that will hunt them down if they actually try to get away with the money. But I think when we're thinking about sovereign communities, we don't really want to rely on that. Like you can still rely on that these days, but if we think about the future where that might not be the case, then we need other mechanisms to ensure that everyone's made whole.
Hi. I just wanted to know if you have an opinion on Open Bazaar and what happened there and how this relates, if at all, because you mentioned the marketplaces in the future, and I'm just wondering if there's any lessons to be learned from Open Bazaar.
Yeah, I think Open Bazaar was actually a peer-to-peer system where everyone had to run their own server, kind of, and then it was really hard to find items on there because like you needed these indices censored people, and it's just a different architecture. I also think they heavily relied on like on-chain escrow systems, and that's clearly not scalable. I think the mempool just blew up yesterday, and try doing a multi-sig escrow transaction right now, it will be quite expensive. So these federations, they have essentially free transactions, so you can much easier enter such escrow contracts. But yeah, one should definitely look into these previously existing systems when building it. Like I'm mostly talking about the concept here. I'm not too familiar with what exactly happened with Open Bazaar. I just know they kind of went on the wrong path and at some point imploded.
Thanks. I come from Mexico, and land titles in a lot of parts of Mexico operate on a thing called ejido, that land titles are just like a piece of paper on a binder that the elders of the town have. So it really brought to my attention the thing about managing land titles with these kinds of federations. My question is, how does non-Bitcoin assets interact inside these federations?
You mean like land titles with non-Bitcoin assets, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it highly depends. Like, for example, for land titles, you probably don't want fully anonymous eCash tokens, right? Because like it's always bound to identity, kind of. Like you would probably just implement some sort of table, some sort of database, and then you would enable some sort of atomic swap with Bitcoin. Like you could swap land for Bitcoin, and maybe you implement some timeout that over like 48 hours, both parties can cancel the deal because you don't want someone to get into a contract while kind of in a bad state of mind. But that would be something to figure out, and it's an enormously interesting area to work on. Like we haven't done any work on that yet. It's like my thoughts on the future, essentially, and I'd very much welcome you to join us in this endeavor.
Hey, could you speak to any of the like feature trade-offs between the use of a federation and like not using a federation? Like, can you still do like the programmability like aspect of eCash with a federation? Or does that make sense?
Sorry, the programmable aspects of eCash?
Yeah, like are there any like feature trade-offs? Like are there any like downsides of using a federation over just the custodial model?
Yeah.
Like can you still do everything that you would be able to do just with a single custodian?
Yeah. So in theory, we could still have the programmable eCash that Kalle presented. We currently don't have it just because it wasn't such a high priority, but I saw some really cool applications for it now, and I think he nerd-stamped me into implementing it. So yeah, the programmability isn't a problem. The main problem with federations is that you need to get consensus between all the participants, and that adds latency. Like with Cashew, you can just go to the to the eCash mint, give the eCash to them, and get Bitcoin back. With Fedimint, you give the eCash to the federation, they run a consensus round, which takes about a second, and then only then they will give you the money. Like it adds a little bit of latency. It depends on how many members there are, on how bad the network latency is. But yeah, that's the main trade-off here. Awesome. Then I think we're out of time. I thank you very much for attending my talk, and hope to see a lot of you in our chats and work on Fedimint with me.
Perfect. So there were only 6 questions. Like one more question, like we have in Bavaria, I mean, you're also from the area more or less, we have the Chiemgauer around the Chiemsee.
Oh, right, yeah. And local currency.
It's a very successful local currency, where the region around this lake is doing this, and it would be nice to see an upgrade to Fedimint in the future. Probably you're talking to these guys already.
Like I'm not a big fan of creating your own fiat currency. Like I want it to be backed by Bitcoin, you know?
Yeah, you get to talk them out of their own token.
Exactly.
Yeah, but this is, maybe you have some good material now with all this funny crypto blowing up.
Right. Yeah. But it's hard to give up the Cantillon effect, right?
Yes. I mean, I don't think they're driving with Lambos there, but they were just early in. Perfect. So it is, Eric. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And see you in the workshop later and around. Okay.
See you.
All right. So we have like 5 minutes until the next talk, which will be about liquidity. What was it again? Liquidity for Lightning nodes. And we have Jose here, who will be